Hello everyone, I welcome you all to Ansarkari and I hope that you all must be doing fine. So let's start with today's analysis video, which is going to be for 27th of February 2023. So adding the Adani firms in 14 NSE indices, it raises worry. Definitely, we've been discussing about the whole Adani issue and the Adani firms, they are being added into the NSE indices. So is that index going to be the correct indicator of the performance of the entire stock market or not is a cause of concern now. And experts, they seek intervention of the NSE board, SEBI, and investors can be hit as nearly 16% or rupees 41 lakh crores assets under the management of the mutual funds is in index funds and ETFs. So ETFs are the exchange traded funds. You can find out about them. So ETFs that they mimic the indices. So that is one of the concerns as far as the interest of the investors are concerned. So you need to find out about the composition of the NSE board, SEBI, and whether it is a statutory body or a constitutional body. So you need to be aware about all these things. And CBI, it arrests Sisodia in the Delhi excise policy case, and there's dirty politics is up. So that is one case. So there are going to be assembly polls in Meghalaya and Nagaland, and so here you need to be you should know that the state assembly elections, obviously, they are held by the Election Commission of India, and the local body elections are held by the state election body. So another issue we've been talking about between the governor and the chief ministers of different states. So we are seeing that governor of Kerala questions the Kerala government, government's move to appoint the Malayalam University's vice chancellor. So the university told to give a list of senior professors who could officiate as VC in charge until a regular appointment is made. And the term of the incumbent Vice Chancellor V. Anil Kumar was set to expire tomorrow, and Raj Bhavan questions the legal standing behind decision to alter the composition of the selection committee. So here you need not go into much details of this issue. However, you just need to have a clear and a simple idea of it. Apart from that, what is important for us is to know about the discretionary powers of the governor, then the pardoning powers of governor, and the important articles related to a governor of a state. So Haryana government suspends the net services in for 3 days. So you need to be knowing about under which law or under which conditions such a step can be taken. So all the internet services and SMSs except the banking and the mobile recharge and all dongle services on the mobile phone except the voice calls would remain suspended. And so the internet services in Haryana is new. They were suspended on Sunday for 3 days amid the fears of communal tension in the wake of murder of two Muslim youth in Rajasthan's Bharatpur on suspicion of cow smuggling earlier this month. So because of that, this has been done. So Prime Minister is going to open or inaugurate the Shiv Moga Airport and he'll be visiting the Belagavi. So Belagavi, you need to be knowing that this is a disputed territory between which two states. And apart from that, right now this area or this region is in which it is a part of which state right now. So lessons from Hindenburg's skin in the game approach. So the author of this article is a political economist and chairman of the data analytics for the Congress party. So we might expect some political elements as well. So during the election season, television is replete with the election surveys by various pollsters predicting the winners' vote shares and the seat tally of the political parties. And So, a moral dilemma. So, extending the thought experiment, assume that channels be. So, you've been like assuming kind of a thing, and then he's trying to explain the whole issue. So, Hindenburg is a firm that places bets on stocks and bond markets. Published a voluminous research report that raised grave allegations about the business ethics of the Adani group of companies and manipulation of the share price to inflate the value. So, basically this Hindenburg group, what it does is first it like does a proper research about one single firm or a group of companies. So after that, they release that report, and that is in a way obviously a negative report. So after that report is published, they take a short seller position. So they first sell the stocks, and after that they buy them. So that's how basically they earn huge amounts of profits, and that is their business model. So that is the thing, and there is empirical evidence to show that it may have been the Hindenburg's skin in the game approach that helped establish its credibility among the market participants. So even in August 2022, another foreign research firm, which is Credit Sites, it published a similar report raising questions on the governance practices and share valuations of the Adani Group. So this is not the first time, but we earlier also saw that one report was also published about the Adani group of companies, manipulations and practices regarding this the share valuations. So that is there, and in fact, there have been at least eight such news or research reports in the last 4 years by similar foreign publications about the Adani Group's alleged dubious business practices and share price movements, and none of them seem to have had the impact that the Hindenburg report has had. So, arguably, it is because of the Hindenburg's willingness to take a financial bet that lend the credibility to its findings than a mere report. So, as I told you, that after publishing the report, they take a short seller position, and that's how they are able to earn profit. However, it's a kind of a risky business, but that is their approach of doing it. So smoke signals from the renewable energy sphere. So here we see that the formal launch of the Indian Oil Corporation's patented solar cook stove at the Indian Energy Week 2023 by the Prime Minister Modi must be looked at closely from the point of view of India's national energy story. So while our Prime Minister he claimed that the stove would soon reach 3 crore households within the next few years, the Union Minister for Petroleum and Natural Gas he called it a catalyst in accelerating the adoption of low carbon options alongside biofuels, electric vehicles, and we have been promoting green hydrogen. So these pronouncements, they have followed a 99% cut in the liquefied petroleum gas subsidy to low-income households in 2023 budget, even as the international fuel prices, they still remain high. And while the past governments, they have failed to convince women to transform their household energy use through technical innovation, today we are at an unprecedented crossroads in India's renewable energy history. So a quest derived from crisis. So the quest for the renewable and decentralized technology in the poor households has closely followed the energy crisis. So among the government's earliest attempt to transform the household's energy consumption, first one was the solar cooker for the National Physical Laboratory, fabricated in the early 1950s, which was a period of great uncertainty in the food security and energy self-sufficiency. And the solar cooker was met with international press coverage and newsreels in the cinema as well. So this was one of the first steps during 1950s. And thereafter, the oil crisis of 1973 and an emerging forest conservation movement trained the government attention on stoves that used firewood and cow dung. And the international focus on the appropriate technologies also reinforced the belief that for the energy needs of the poor, small was beautiful. And we are having this improved stove. So accordingly, in the 1980s, the government turned to improved chulas in its national energy policy. And then the program sought to check deforestation by reducing the fuel wood consumption and also benefit women's health and finances. So it was launched across 23 states and 5 UTs. So the sole incentive to adopt the improved chulas was a 50% subsidy that was provided by the government. And by the next year, the program, it had folded up. So the reasons for the failure included the stove's construction, high maintenance cost, and the alleged bureaucratic corruption. So the state governments, they had little autonomy apart from meeting preset targets, while workers charged with installations were underpaid. So that's why these are the reasons why the program of improved chulas, it failed. And apart from that, and a report of 2004, it noted that cooking constituted 80% of rural Indian households' energy consumption. So the International Energy Agency found that 668 million people in India depended on biomass for cooking and lighting in 2013, making India the largest consumer of fuel wood for household use. So today, despite the purported success of the government's LPG scheme that we have, there's unprecedented inflation in the fuel prices, and there's gradual withdrawal of subsidies that has now it is forced the woman to resort to the chula with all its hazards back again. And intervention then and now, what are the interventions now required? So there are obvious parallels between the government's boost to India's oil solar stove and this history that a public sector innovation with supposedly revolutionary impact after a fuel crisis, a gulf between the state subsidized schemes and its practical implementation is another thing, and the absence of any long term goal to improve the rural incomes, despite the correlation between the per capita income and the type of energy consumption. So, okay, so this is another very interesting thing that has been mentioned, that there is a linkage between or a correlation between the per capita income of people, specifically in the rural households, and the type of energy they depend or they use for their consumption needs. So while the older interventions in the renewable sphere, they were led by the state and mostly non-governmental organizations, which provided shallow fixes to deep social problems. Today, the real action is elsewhere. So public money is now funneled into heavily subsidized large-scale private projects that produce green energy largely for the commercial use. And today, technical innovation is in the renewable energy policy, despite its pretensions this serves to entrench a highly uneven energy landscape. So here, like it is not talking about the solutions. The article was just focusing upon the problems and a trend and what, like how the government initiatives they have fared over a period of time, and if failed, so what were the reasons behind them, and what is the trend in terms of again the rural people's source of like energy production in their houses. So talking about transparency in the OTT regulation, so it has been 2 years since the government issued the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines and Digital Media Ethics Code rules, through which Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, it was given the task of regulating the content on OTT platforms and the online platforms. So India's approach came to be like termed as a light touch co-regulation model, where there is self-regulation at the industry level and final oversight mechanism at the ministry level. So that is basically the approach that we have taken when it comes to regulating the OTT platforms. There's some element of self-regulation and then obviously oversight mechanism at the ministerial level. So towards media literacy, though the OTT rules, they were notified in 2021, there's a little awareness about them and among the general public also. So a first step is increasing the awareness about those rules. So rules mandate the display of the contact details relating to the grievance redressal mechanisms and the grievance officers on the OTT websites or their interface. And we see that the compliance is very low. And in many cases, either the complaint redressal information is not published, or if it is published, that is in a manner that makes it difficult for a user to notice it very easily. So there's non-compliance with those rules that were published, and the interpretation of the age rating that is under 13 plus, for example, and the content descriptors, that is the violence, or for instance, it could be in the respective languages of the video apart from the English. So such provisions, they are embedded in law for display of the anti-tobacco message in the firms. in the films. And further, age ratings and the content descriptors, they could be shown prominently in full screen mode for a mandatory minimum duration instead of few seconds on the screen. So there's need for transparency of periodic audit of the actual existence and efficacy of the access controls and age verification mechanisms, and then the display of grievance redressal details by each OTT platform may be undertaken by an independent body. So we need to make things much more transparent. We need periodic audits. And so there is no provision for the disclosure or the publication of an apology or warning or a censure on the platform or the website. So this is absent as of now, and this may be incorporated in the rules later on. And financial penalties are on erring entities may also be provided. So in the present era of the media convergence, it is high time we evolve a common set of guidelines for the content, its classification, age ratings, violations, etc., so that the content across platforms is governed in a uniform manner. And right now, the OTT regulatory model, it seeks to be an efficacious combination of self-regulation and legal backing, and this is in line with the global trend also. So the IB ministry, it envisaged that India's OTT regulations would raise India's stature at an international level and serve as a model for other nations to emulate. So the above initiatives towards enhancing the media literacy and transparency will help in furthering this objective, realize the efficacy of self-regulation, and empower millions of OTT consumers. So again, talking about the problems in the MGNREGA scheme, there are payment delays, there are technological issues, then there is a budget cut that we saw in this year's union budget. And in 14 states, more than 50% of the workers, they are not eligible for the Aadhaar-based payment system. And talking about the financial concerns related to MGNREGA scheme, so the data has been presented here. So the Directorate General of Civil Aviation is going to hire more employees to strengthen the safety of the civil aviation sector. Then onion exports, they increased by 16%. Poultry culling starts in Jharkhand's Bokaro as the bird flu spreads there. And cost overruns for many infrastructure projects coming from the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So obviously this is one of the concerns, specifically in the context of the infrastructure projects. Whenever they are delayed, obviously it leads to cost overruns, and obviously it's a huge financial burden on the government. And then migrant board breaks and incidentally killing many people. So the sophisticated anatomy of heat waves. So what are the warning issued by the Indian Meteorological Department regarding heat waves? So why do heat waves they occur? Why are they more frequent and intense? And how do the La Nina and the El Nino weather patterns affects the formation of heat waves? And how can we forecast the arrival of heat waves? So we'll be looking into only the important details from the perspective of the examination. So last week we saw that IMD warned that maximum temperatures over northwest, west, and central India, it would be 3 to 5 degrees Celsius higher than the long-term average. So we are seeing that things are getting worse as we talk about climate change. And on 21st February, the national capital recorded its third hottest February day at 33.6 degrees Celsius in more than 5 decades. So we have already been we've already been seeing the impact and already started seeing rise in temperature. So what is a heat wave? According to IMD, a region has a heat wave if its ambient temperature deviates by at least 4.5 to 6.4 degrees Celsius from its long-term average. And there is also a heat wave if the maximum temperature crosses 45 degrees Celsius or 37 degrees Celsius at a hill station. So these are the two conditions. So when the ambient temperature it deviates from 4.5 to 6.4 degrees Celsius from the long-term average. And secondly, if we are seeing the maximum temperature crossing 45 degrees Celsius in plain and in hill stations, when it crosses 37 degrees Celsius, we declared that to be a heat wave. Then heat waves, they are expected to become longer and more intense and frequent over the Indian subcontinent. And in 2022 itself, the heat waves, they started early and they were more numerous. So in 2022 also we were suffering from heat wave incidences, and they also extended further south into the peninsular India due to a north-south pressure pattern set up by the La Nina, and that is a world-affecting weather phenomenon in which a band of cool water spreads east to west across the equatorial Pacific Ocean. And from the last 3 years, we've been having La Nina conditions, so which was served as a precursor to 2023, likely to begin an El Nino year. So this year, we're expecting that El Nino might be there, and El Nino is a kind of a complementary phenomenon in which warmer water it spreads west to east across the equatorial Pacific. And as we eagerly await the likely birth of an El Nino this year, we have already had a heat wave occur over the northwest India. And heat waves, they tend to be confined to north and northwest India in the El Nino years. So again, another factor that is El Nino, we are expecting El Nino. So that is again a concern for us. So how do the heat waves they actually occur? So heat waves are formed for one of the two reasons. One can be warmer air is flowing in from elsewhere, or it is being produced locally. These are the two situations or the two possibilities for occurrence of a heat wave, and it is a local phenomenon when the air is warmed by higher land surface temperatures, or because the air sinking down from above is compressed along the way, producing hot air near the surface. So first of all, in spring, India typically has air flowing in from the west-northwest, and this direction of airflow is bad news for India for several reasons. So the air is flowing from west to northwest, and in the context of the climate change, West Asia is warming faster than other regions in the latitude similarly close to the equator, and it serves as a source of the warm air that blows into India. So West Asia, it is warming faster than other regions. Likewise, air flowing in from the northwest, it rolls over the mountains of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and so some of the compression also happens on the leeward side of these mountains, entering India with a bristling warmth. So while air flowing in over the oceans it is expected to bring cooler air, the Arabian Sea is unfortunately warming faster than most other ocean regions. So like all the factors are just favoring the formation of heat waves. And next, the strong upper atmospheric westerly winds that come in from the Atlantic Ocean over to India during the spring season, they control the near surface winds. So anytime winds flow from the west to the east, we need to remember that the winds, they are blowing faster than the planet itself, which is also rotating from west to east. So the energy to run past the earth near the surface against surface friction can only come from above. So this descending air, it compresses and warms up to generate some heat waves. And finally, the so-called lapse rate, that is the rate at which temperature cools from the surface to the upper atmosphere, it is declining under the global warming. So in other words, we can say global warming tends to warm the upper atmosphere faster than the air near the surface. So this in turn means that the sinking air is warming due to the global warming, and it thus produces heat waves as it sinks and compresses, and it is like already warm. So that is another concern. And how do air mass contributes to heat waves? So the other factors that affect the formation of heat waves, they are the age of the air mass and how far it has traveled. Then the north and northwestern heat waves, they are typically formed with air masses that come from 800 to 1600 kilometers away, and they are around 2 days old. So heat waves over the peninsular India, on the other hand, they arrive from the oceans, which are closer, and they're barely a day old. So as a result, they are on average less intense when we talk about heat waves in the peninsular India. So in sum, we can say that heat waves, they have a sophisticated anatomy with important implications for how well we can predict them. Nonetheless, early warning systems, they can take advantage of the processes, the modes of formation, their location, and age of the air mass to improve the quality of warnings and also increase how soon they can be issued. So for reasons that we are yet to fully understand, mortality over India due to heat waves are substantially lower than those in other mid-latitude regions, and we should further improve the forecast warnings, issue them as soon as possible and couple them with city-wide graded heat action plans to protect the vulnerable population. Talking about the menstrual leave policies and are they really implemented at the global level? So recently we talked about this thing and Supreme Court said basically it refused to hear petitions regarding this menstrual leave policy for workers and students. And we'll be looking into why did it refuse on this and which are the states in India that like already have a menstrual leave policy. So it says that basically looking into why the Supreme Court refused to hear these petitions was that it said that it is a policy matter and obviously Parliament is there. So judiciary can't directly jump onto formulating this policy. So the role of judiciary is going to be ensuring that whatever policy is formulated, that is not violating the Constitution of India. So later on, if there is any issue in that policy, that would be taken up by the Supreme Court, and it cannot like initially jump into this the policy formulation thing as far as the menstrual leave policy is concerned. So what is menstrual leave? And it basically refers to all policies that allow the employees or students to take time off when they're experiencing their menstrual pain or discomfort. And in the context of workplace, it refers to policies that allow for both paid and unpaid leave or time for rest. And more than half of those who menstruate experience pain for a couple of days a month. For some, it is debilitating enough to hamper their daily activities and their productivity also. So, what are the arguments against this policy? Now, not everyone and not even all those who menstruate is in favor of the menstrual leave policy. So some believe that it is not required and that it will backfire and it will lead to employer discrimination against the woman. For example, in response to the plea filed in the Supreme Court, a caveat was filed by a law student, Anjali Patel. She was represented by advocate Satyam Mitra. So it highlighted a potential issue with the menstrual leave. And the law student says that if you compel employers to grant menstrual pain leave, it may operate as a de facto disincentive for the employers to engage women in their establishments, and this has a policy dimension. So what are some of the global menstrual leave policies that are already like being implemented and they're working in different countries across the world? So we're seeing that among a host of other sexual health rights, Spain, it became the first European country to grant paid menstrual leaves to the workers. And workers, they now have the right to 3 days of menstrual leave, which can be like expended to 5 days a month. And in Asia, we have Japan that has introduced the menstrual leaves as part of its labor law in 1947. And after the idea, it became popular with the labor unions in 1920s. And at present, under Article 68, employers cannot ask women who experience difficult periods to work during that time. So it is even a part of their constitution. And talking about Indonesia too, it introduced a policy in 1948 and amended in 2003, which states that workers experiencing the menstrual pain, they are not obliged to work in the first 2 days of their cycle. Even like we have it in Philippines and even in African nations like Zambia, there is there. So are attempts being made in India also regarding this? So among state governments, when we talk about Bihar and Kerala, they are the only ones to introduce menstrual leave to women. So we are having it in Bihar also, and then in Kerala. So the Bihar government, it introduced this menstrual leave policy in 1992, allowing the employers 2 days of paid menstrual leave every month. And so additionally, we see that Congress MP from Kerala, it announced that he will be moving a private member's bill seeking the right to paid leave during menstruation for working women, menstrual leave for female students, and free access to menstrual health products in the ongoing budget session of the parliament. So that is the whole thing and the whole situation regarding this. So we are seeing increase in cyber attacks, and here there's a case study about GoDaddy servers they were attacked, and what impacts did it have? So here you need to be knowing about what is the infrastructure in India to fight against cyber attacks. Supreme Court asked the government what it has done to end manual scavenging, and like it has already been banned. It was like Many years ago, still, we are seeing that this practice is still being practiced by many people, and no major step we can say, or no major improvement when we talk about banning this practice at the ground level. So, practically, it is still being practiced. So, there was like no benefit of that ban that was passed by the Supreme Court. So Supreme Court, it has directed the government to place on record within 6 weeks the steps by it to implement its nearly 10-year-old judgment to end manual scavenging. So it has been already 10 years since the Supreme Court banned the practice of manual scavenging and prevent future generations from this inhuman practice while making entry into sewers without safety gear a crime even in emergency situations. So this is a crime. And so, talking about the laws that we have, so we have the Employment of Manual Scavengers and Construction of Dry Latrines Prohibition Act of 1993. Then we have the Prohibition of Employment as Manual Scavengers and the Rehabilitation Act of 2013. So, the top court itself, it had reinforced the prohibition and directed the rehabilitation of people employed as the manual scavengers in its judgment, which was the Safai Karamchari Andolan and others versus Union of India. So this you need to remember that it was underwood judgment. Apart from that, so the court impleaded the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, the National Commission for Scheduled Caste, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes as respondents in the case. The court has appointed Advocate K. Parmeshwar as its amicus curiae, and the Social Justice Ministry has to file its report with information in 6 weeks regarding the steps that the government has taken to ban this thing and ensure that it is not happening at the ground level. Although we know the reality, but anyways. So Supreme Court again intrigued by the lack of protection officers for the domestic violence cases. So protection officers who should ideally be women, they have a pivotal role from the beginning to the end. And we are seeing that there is lack of such protection officers. And Supreme Court has again sought more information from the government about this Mission Shakti, which is an umbrella scheme for the safety, security, and empowerment of women intrigued by a possible chronic shortage in protection officers to deal with the domestic violence cases. We see that though most of these districts, they have one-stop centers which are established under Mission Shakti to receive victims, there is still a lack of clarity about how many of them actually they employ protection officers to effectively help the traumatized survivors. And the appointment of the protection officers that is mandated under Section 8 of the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act of 2005. And so ideally, a protection officer should be a woman, and which definitely has a pivotal role under the law. So they help the victims file the complaints, give information to the police, provide immediate protection and support, and inform victims about their legal rights and support them through the court proceedings. So that is the role of a protection officer. And protection officers, like the magistrates who are tasked with the implementation of the enactment, they have been conceived as a backbone to effectuate the law enacted with laudable objectives by the parliament. And so that is the thing. And let's see again, information has been sought by the government regarding this Mission Shakti and the protection officers. So India, UK agreed to make progress on the trade pact. So they have agreed to make further progress on the ongoing negotiations for the free trade agreement, and also to swiftly organize the next bilateral economic and the financial dialogue soon. So India recently we concluded the seventh round of talks with the UK, and so that is there. So we are in talks. So it's been great to hear from Indian technology business leaders in Bengaluru how they are pushing the economy forward, and I look forward to further collaboration as we continue to trade and create jobs. So, as part of the Banjara community outreach, Union government is going to mark Sant Sevalal Maharaj Jayanti. So, in a first, the Union government on Sunday kicked off year-long celebrations to mark 284th birth anniversary of Sant Sevalal Maharaj, which is a spiritual and religious leader of the Banjara community. And Banjara community is a nomadic community that has been declared as a scheduled tribe in a few states of India. And this comes with weeks of efforts from RSS linked outfit to cement the community's inclusion in the Hindu fold. And there is a move has urged some within the community who have said that these efforts amounted to Hinduization of their culture, which had nothing to do with Hinduism. So they have been declared as STs in 5 states. So these states are Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Bihar, Odisha, and Jharkhand, and a scheduled caste in Himachal Pradesh and Karnataka, and OBC in Chhattisgarh, and Daman and Diu, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. So they've been like declared OBCs in all these states. And Union Ministry of Culture, it also kicked off celebrations at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar International Center in New Delhi, where the culture and the dance programs, they will be performed along with an exhibition of the Banjara art from 2 days, for 2 days. So you can find out more about this personality. So we are seeing the Danish crown prince and princess on a 4-day visit to India, and they've been visiting Taj Mahal. So they'll be addressing the opening session of the India-Denmark Partners for Green and Sustainable Progress, which will be organized by CIA, and he'll also call on the President Draupadi Murmu. So that is there. So we know about the current situation in Punjab, specifically in the Ajnala, where violence took place, and how a person was basically released from jail because of mob violence. So the chief minister of Punjab is saying that other nations, specifically Pakistan and other nations, they are funding these Khalistan supporters, and the Punjab police they are capable of handling the issue. On only a handful of persons they have been supporting the movement in the state. So those who took the Sikh holy book to the police station as a shield cannot be called the Waris of Punjab. So we have e-Sanjeevani, that is a great boon, shows the power of digital India, says the Prime Minister. So till now, the number of teleconsultants using this app, it has crossed the figure of 10 crores, and an amazing bond between the patient and doctor. So this is a big achievement. So e-Sanjeevani is kind of a telemedicine service. So Russia accuses US and allies of the open blackmail ahead of G20 foreign ministers meet. So, a day after we saw the G20 financial ministers and central bank governors meeting in Bengaluru, it failed to issue a joint communique regarding Russia. It basically Russia praised the role of Indian presidency and accused the Western countries of open blackmail. So, despite crisis, it's a good time to invest in Sri Lanka, says the Colombo-based Indian CEOs. So, Sri Lanka definitely will know about their economic situation right now. So, it is reeling under last year's crushing economic meltdown and consequent political turmoil at the same time. But it is still a good time to invest in the cash-strapped island nation, according to Indian business leaders in the capital, Colombo. And so they're saying that there's enormous scope of investment, and that is basically in information technology, in tourism, in renewable energy. So we know that the major industry for Sri Lanka is the tourism industry, and that's how they basically earn. Coming to Financial Express, let's see what else do we have here for us today. So SEBI plans a central database on FPIs, that is the foreign portfolio investors, beneficial owners. So proposal to create repository mooted a few years ago as well. So beneficial owners, they are the natural persons who own or who control an FPI, and investors who have put in more than 25% in a fund, they are considered as the beneficial owners. So they are natural persons who own or who can control a foreign portfolio investors, and an investor who have put around 25% or more in a fund, they are considered as the beneficial owners. So the threshold is lower at 15% when the investor is a trust or a partnership firm. And cumulatively, NRIs, they cannot hold more than 50% of the assets managed. And no single NRI can be the beneficial owner of more than 25% of any foreign funds assets under management. Lower threshold of 10% can be applied when the fund is from a high risk jurisdiction. So there's like a HR Khan committee that was there. So the proposal to create such a central database, it was mooted a few years ago by the HR Khan committee, but it was put on back burner subsequently at that point of time. So we have looked into who actually are beneficial owners. So, Union External Affairs Minister says that de-risking the global economy. Today, the world has learned a lesson that security means not only the physical security, not only the economic security, it also means health security, food security. So today we have to find a way of de-risking the global economy. So how differently you can interpret security, four dimensions that are there. So one of the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee members says that India's growth appears to be very fragile, and it may fall short of what the country needs to meet the aspirations of its growing workforce. And in India, basically, he's expecting inflation to remain high in 2022-23, but it may come down significantly in 2023-24. However, growth appears to be very fragile, and monetary tightening is compressing the demand. So obviously, increasing the repo rate is one of the factors which basically works against economic growth, or we can say which does not let the economy grow. So again, we've been like talking about cereal inflation and particularly the wheat prices. So government is wary of the drop in the wheat stocks. This is obviously because of the even the impact of the change in the rainfall pattern on the domestic wheat production. So even the domestic supply has been impacted, and globally, obviously, we know because of the Russia-Ukraine war, which are the two main countries supplying the wheat food grains globally. So the even at the global level, the wheat supply has been impacted. So the stock at both the global and the domestic levels, they are suffering, and we're seeing elevated mandi prices, heat wave to a 30 million ton procurement target. So even heat wave like conditions will be impacting. So, talking about the portion scheme and the funding delays. So, release of funds under the PM portion scheme. Earlier, it was called the National Program of the Midday Meals in Schools. It has been slow. And as per the analysis by the Center for the Policy Research Accountability Initiative, This is there, and in financial year 2022, only 48% of the approved budget had been released by the center at the end of the third quarter. So release of the portion sums to states, it slows down. You can see how the height of the bars is being reducing. And with the bulk transfers in the last quarter, we saw this. And then education cess funding portion, there has been like we can say it has been growing in a way. So education cess as a percentage of the portion allocation. Coming to Indian Express, so keep the airport secret, said the Home Ministry, and but wraps on clearance of the entire Great Nicobar project. So talking about holistic development and this Great Nicobar project, first we'll be trying to understand this. We'll try to understand this map. So this is the Great Nicobar project. Here it is the capital of Andaman and Nicobar, that is Port Blair. And this is on the western side, we have Bay of Bengal. Here we have the Andaman Sea located. This is the southernmost island is the Great Nicobar. And so, citing a strategic imperative, the Union Home Ministry it wanted the 8.45 square kilometers airport component of the Great Nicobar Development Project to be kept confidential. So, this is one thing, and the Environment Ministry, in an unprecedented move, has withheld all the discussions on the forest clearance to this entire project. And the Forest Advisory Committee is an expert body that examines and authorizes a diversion of the forest land for projects. So besides the airport, the holistic development of the Great Nicobar Island project, it also proposes rupees 72,000 crores of township, a container transshipment terminal, and a power plant. So this is talking about Prime Minister's Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana, where the government is providing financial aid to the farmers. So it is showing that more than rupees 16,800 crores to more than 8 crore beneficiary farmers under 13th installment of the PM Kisan Samman Nidhi has been provided. So there is a like comprehensive grievance redressal mechanism and centralized help desk to resolve the issues of the beneficiaries. The entire expenditure of the scheme is borne by entirely Government of India, and till date they've been provided us with the figures. And annually rupees 6,000 per annum basically is transferred to the beneficiary farmers in 3 equal installments. And the status of applications and the benefits of the scheme, they're available on this website, so you can go ahead and read more about it. So we see that 30 tigers die in 2 months. Officials, they say there is no cause for alarm, and this is basically a winter hazard. So in the last 10 years, January has seen highest number of tiger deaths in the country at 128, followed by 123 deaths in March, according to the National Tiger Conservation Authority figures. And the number of deaths, they start dipping in later months, with September recording the lowest at 43 and it rises again in the winter months. So we need to know more about the National Tiger Conservation Authority. And apart from that, what are the like, okay, then about tiger census. So the periodicity of the census and more about it. So we are talking about the highest number of tigers. So basically, Madhya Pradesh, it saw the biggest spike in tiger numbers at 526, closely followed by Karnataka and then Uttarakhand. So the issue is not of tigers dying. They will die like any other animal, but there is an increase in poaching and it would be a matter of concern. And the tiger death in the Satyamangalam Reserve is basically a case of poaching by the Bavaria's poachers. And this is a matter of concern because the Bavarias, they are an organized group of poachers, and basically organized poaching was negligible earlier. So this needs to be taken a note of. So if we don't end the war, war will end us. So this is for the Russia-Ukraine war. So talking about the new abnormal, the global institutions and consensus, they are fraying under pressure from protectionism. So our quest of Atmanirbharta, it has kept import tariffs high. This further fuels the high cost economy, besides bringing in production inefficiencies. So the existing PLI scheme would be, it should be like critically reviewed and its objectives must be clearly spelled out. Any industry in which India lacks the basic global comparative advantage or whose survival without the government support is doubtful in the medium term, it shouldn't be considered under this scheme. And we have seen that the supply side disruptions during the last years, it has wreaked havoc in the world economy. And to demonstrate the resilience, countries, they have been racing to adopt policies that ostensibly build self-reliance and self-sufficiency. So some policies also aim at exploiting the opportunity and becoming a part of the disrupted global supply chains. So many such policies, they run contrary to the WTO rules. And in the world's largest economy, that is America First policies, they're directed at protecting the US producers from the foreign competition. So we are seeing that there's rise of protectionism, specifically in the Western world, and with so much of grandstanding in the name of encouraging green economy, there has been virtually no progress under the UNFCCC negotiations in the transfer of the promised finance and the technology from developed countries to the developing ones. And also the developed countries, they haven't done anything to remove the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So high global inflation is another unusual phenomenon right now. For many decades in the pre-COVID era, central banks in the West, they struggled to increase inflation to near 2%. So they were struggling to increase inflation to near 2%. And right now the situation is, it is completely opposite to that. Now getting inflation down to this level is a distant dream. So some are even contemplating increasing the inflation target. So obviously that would not be something which is acceptable, because if you're not able to reduce the inflation, you cannot increase your inflation target and say that you have met the inflation target. Apart from that, India's stance on trade policy has been confusing to say the least. So we have stayed away from many important regional pluralistic trade agreements. One of them is RCEP and other free trade agreements in the name of national interest. And this inward-looking stance contradicts our aspiration to be a part of the global value supply chains. But again, whatever concerns we have and the reasons that why we are not a part of a particular trade pact or any such multilateral initiative. Obviously, there are certain plausible concerns because of which we are not a part of that. So it is only recently that we have expressed our eagerness to finalize the long pending trade agreements and our desire to restrict trade with and investments from China. It hasn't worked as of now. And the efficacy of the press note 3 of 2020 issued by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade to restrict the Chinese investment in India needs to be analyzed again. Noticeably, in a sudden U-turn to this policy, 14 of the Apple Inc.'s Chinese suppliers, they are now being allowed to set up their operations in India via the domestic partnerships. So India's trade deficit with China, which was earlier $44 billion in 2020-21, it has increased to $73 billion in 2021-22, and it has reportedly crossed $64 billion during the first 9 months of the current financial year. Okay, so that is the situation when we talk about trade with China. And policymakers, they are taking a comfort in inflation ebbing. CPI inflation hasn't come down to 4%, which is RBI's target. And our quest for Atmanirbharta has kept the import tariffs also high. But this obviously it affects the cost of production. And when we talk about the efficiencies, when we talk about the economies of scale, so we are not able to actualize them in many areas where obviously we do not have the specialization and expertise. So the basic structure of the world order, established over the decades through trust, multilateral institutions, and mutually beneficial and well-intentioned global negotiations in various fora, that is under cloud. And the theme of India's G20 presidency, that is Vasudev Kutumbakam, that is one earth, one family, one future, it frames the difficult task. So the good news is that major actors involved in or the responsible for the global chaos are members of this group, and they will come together at the discussion table in the coming months. And the bad news is that their stance on many issues is entrenched. And recently concluded G20 finance ministers meeting ending without a communique is not a good sign. So though talking about the power of narrative, so stories they are being planted and narratives they are being managed. This is likely to intensify because power to coordinate among democracies has weakened. So, free and open societies have press freedom, and this is reflected across all democracies in our analysis. Large federal democracies like India and United States, as well as relatively smaller, more homogeneous democracies like Sweden and Germany, they're all consistently faced with the negative media coverage. This is exactly what is expected from the open democracies, where the media has an important role to play as a fourth pillar in disseminating information, knowledge, and balancing the overall power. So, the larger concern, therefore, is the grave influence that an authoritarian country like China exerts on the so called free press from across countries of the world. So Iran's currency slides to record lows, snowballing since September, and the currency is real, so it has lost nearly 45% of its value since nationwide protests began in September. And foreign exchange traders they say the real's depreciation stems partly from the unrest and the Iran's increased isolation in face of the Western sanctions. And the reimposition of the US sanctions in 2018 by US President Trump, they have harmed Iran's economy by limiting the Tehran's oil exports and access to the foreign currency. So these are the reasons why the currency is sliding, or we can say it is depreciating. So, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India, it calls for CEOs meet to take stock of the sectoral reforms agenda. And former member Srinivasan is critical of diluting the investment norms. So, the proposed amendments they suggest that the minimum paid up capital be specified by the RIDAI, considering the size and the scale of operations, class or subclass of insurance business, and the category or the type of insurer. So at a time when the insurance companies they have burnt their fingers in the shares of the Adani group companies, as many as 65 CEOs from the general insurance companies, the standalone health insurers, life insurance companies, all of them, they like this week they'll be meeting to take stock of the developments in the sector, especially the reform agenda being initiated by the regulator. And so they'll be deliberating and discussing the way forward, according to an insurance sector official. And some of the insurance companies like LIC, it has witnessed a fall in the market valuation of their investments in the Adani Group. So this is the second issue. And CEOs, they are expected to give their feedback and suggestions on the pending insurance reforms. So the reports would be submitted by the Regulatory Review Committee set up by both the councils, that is General Insurance Council and the Life Insurance Council. At the instance of the RIDA, they are expected to come up with a discussion also. And last 1 year or so, they have seen a slew of revolutionary regulatory pronouncements uncharacteristic of any financial services industry that requires care and prudence for healthy, stable development and growth. And some of these includes dangerous proposals like deleting Section 27 of the Insurance Act, which deals with strict investment norms for policyholders' funds and reducing the capital requirements to paltry amounts, paving the way for emergence of mushroom insurance companies. So the Department of Financial Services, it has issued the Insurance Law Amendment Bill 2022 for public feedback, and the bill proposes some major changes in the Insurance Act of 1938 and the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority Act of 1999. So these are the two acts that we have, and the amendments they proposed. They proposed the changes and the new insertions in the definition section. Some notable changes includes the insurance intermediary, captive insurer, insurance business, Indian insurance company, insurance cooperative society, insurer, personal accident insurance business, premium, principal officer, surveyor, and travel insurance business. So this is some of the proposed changes. And the proposed amendment suggests that the minimum paid-up capital to be specified by RIDAI considering the size and the scale of the operations, class or subclass of the insurance business, and the category or the type of insurer. So as of now, the paid-up capital required to start the general or life or standalone health insurance business is rupees 100 crores. And for reinsurance business, it is rupees 200 crores. So we are talking about the paid-up capital. And as per the proposed bill, an applicant may apply for a composite license enabling any type of insurance business. So services exports are going to cross $300 billion this fiscal, and tapping the global opportunities would help achieve a $1 trillion target by 2030 as per SCPC report. So 40 to 45% share of the IT and ITES in the exports, followed by tourism, education, and the financial services. So developed countries are contributing maximum share in these exports, and export support measures to help in enhancing the competitiveness of the sector. Free trade agreements with UAE and Australia that are helping explore new markets and increase the shipments. Service Exports Promotion Council Director said that support measures in the forthcoming foreign trade policy would help further boost the exports in as far as the services exports are concerned. So hard versus soft landing, continued monetary policy tightening focused on reeling in the inflation can lead to a hard landing in both United States and India and have a bearing on the big elections in both the countries next year. So PCE price inflation in United States, the general and the core inflation, it is like not fluctuating much. Again, it is still at the higher level. And PCE price inflation and the percentage over a preceding month has been depicted over here, and talking about the India CPI inflation on year-on-year basis. So you can have a look at it. So the core inflation is at 6.2% and the general inflation was 6.5% in January 2023 in India. So talking about US inflation and unemployment, definitely this has impact on India, because if there is like more inflation, and obviously we know that they've been following a tight monetary policy, so whenever the policy rate is increased, so it leads to a huge amount of cash outflows from the Indian economy by the foreign portfolio investors, and then obviously this adds up to the pressure on the Indian rupee. So that's how we can talk about the linkage and the impact on the Indian economy because of the changes in a US economy and inflation and unemployment situation. And talking about the situation in India, so RBI is facing a similar dilemma, which is the declining trend in the consumer price index inflation, which we saw it reversed back in January. So here we saw that CPI, it increased in the month of January, and central bank's mandate requires it to keep that the annual CPI inflation should be at 4%. So while this target is subject to an upward tolerance limit of 6%, making it less rigid than the US Fed's 2% target. Even these levels were breached for both the general and the core inflation in the latest reported month. So the 6% mark has also been crossed by the CPI inflation, both the core and the headline inflation. And the greatest source of uncertainty for the RBI now is the impact of higher than normal temperatures on wheat and other rabi crops, which are due for harvesting from March end. And obviously, this would be further, adding up upon the pressure of inflation. And if temperatures they spike further as they did last March, it could reignite inflation in food. So also a pickup in the rural wages appears underway. So with the average year-on-year increase in rates exceeding CPI inflation since November. So like the Fed, the RBI too, it has hiked its benchmark repo lending rate from 4% to 6.5% since early May 2022, and how much more it may hike to dampen the demand and risk a hard landing would possibly as much a function of electoral compulsions as of economics. So since we are also like approaching closer towards the general elections next year, so there would be obviously some political interest as well. And increasing the repo rate or increasing the policy rate, it negatively impacts the economic growth, because increase in repo rate leads to increase in the cost of borrowing, which reduces investment, and obviously then it leads to reduced economic growth. So ALMA's new brain, so it is Chile's telescope, will produce even better images of the universe. So the Atacama Large Millimeter or Submillimeter Array, that is ALMA, which is a giant radio telescope with 66 high precision antennae located in the Atacama Desert of the northern Chile, will get software and hardware upgrades that will help it collect much more data and produce sharper images than ever before. So why it is located in this Atacama Desert? So the telescope, it is situated at an altitude of more than 5,000 meters above the sea level on the Chajnanto Plateau, which is there in Chile's Atacama Desert, and the millimeter and the submillimeter waves which are observed by it are very susceptible to atmospheric water vapor absorption on Earth. So Atacama Desert is among the driest place on Earth, and most like nights are clear of clouds and free of light distorting moisture, making it a perfect location to examine the universe. So in 2013, it discovered starburst galaxies earlier in the universe's history than they were previously thought to have existed. It then provided detailed images of the protoplanetary disk surrounding HL Tauri, which is a very young T Tauri star in the constellation Taurus, and transformed the previously accepted theories about the planetary formations. And in 2015, the telescope also helped observe a phenomenon which is known as the Einstein ring, which occurs when light from a galaxy or star passes by a massive object en route to Earth, is extraordinary detail. Most recently, it provided the first image of the supermassive black hole at the center of Milky Way, and the image was unveiled by scientists in May 2022. So talking about the situation in Punjab and who are Bandi Singhs and the demand for their release. So protesters in Punjab, they have been demanding the release of Bandi Singhs incarcerated in cases that are in some cases almost 3 decades old. And basically, who are these prisoners and what is the whole issue? Let's understand that. So Bandi Singh is the expression which is used for Sikh prisoners who were convicted of alleged involvement in militancy, and they continue to be in jail in various parts of the country. So militancy was wiped out in early 1990s, and Sikh activists argue that these prisoners, they have already spent more than 3 decades behind bars. They have grown old and are in many cases, they are in poor physical and mental health. So the prisoners, they should now be released. This is what is their demand. So why is this a issue now? So the issue has never really gone away when we talk about this, and with various political parties harping on it to take on the rivals or to get the support of the Radical Six. So all at the beginning of the December last year, we saw that Shiromani Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee, it launched a massive signature campaign seeking their release, and the Shiromani Akali Dal also demanded their release separately. And the BJP, which has been trying to win over the voters in Punjab, has given some hope to the agitators. And the issue of release of prisoners is to be considered by the government of these states where the cases had been registered. For example, about Byan Singh was assassinated in Chandigarh in 1993. The blast took place in Delhi. So the protesters say that the AAP government is yet to write to the center about the release of Bandi Singhs. So this is the whole thing about it. And talking about India's defense exports, so I on $5 billion target. And what is the state of play right now? So, what is the value of India's defense exports currently? So, India's defense export has grown by 334% on a small base in the last 5 years. So, here you need to be like, I've already explained this thing several times, which is the small base effect. So basically here what happens is when we are comparing figures with obviously with figures of a particular year which is known as the base year, and when the figure is very low, and in subsequent months or subsequent years when we saw that even there is a marginal increase, so on comparison we come to find out that it is like it appears to be that it's a very huge increase. Actually in real sense it is not that much. So that is, we can say, kind of the small base effect. So because of that also we are seeing that India's defense exports, they have grown by 334 percentage, and they touched almost rupees 13,000 crores in 2021-22. And so this includes the special chemicals, organisms, materials, equipment, and technology items that can be exported only under the authorization from the Defense Ministry's Department of Defense Production. So what kind of defense equipments does India really export? So major exports includes the personal protective items, offshore patrol vessels. We have advanced light helicopters, SU avionics, then Bharti radio, coastal surveillance systems, Kavach Mod 2 launcher, fire control systems. So all of that, it includes what all the exports. And what other defense platforms is India looking for exports? So India is in talks with countries such as Argentina and Egypt to export their LCA Tejas, which has over the last few years, but it has participated in several air shows, including those in Singapore, Malaysia, Bahrain, and Dubai. So India has hoped for a deal with Malaysia also, but lost out to the Korean aerospace industries, which will be supplying 18 FA-50 light combat aircraft to the country. Then we are also in talks with Mauritius and with South American nation Guyana for export of DO 228 and fast petrol vessels. Then with Philippines also we are going to export the BrahMos missiles. And in 2022, Armenia signed a government-to-government deal with India to buy the Pinaka multi-barrel rocket launchers and rockets and ammunition developed by DRDO. Armenia is learned to have sought Swathi weapon locating radars in 2020 also. And which other countries to which India currently exports is India private companies and the defense PSUs. They currently export the defense equipments to more than 75 countries. And according to DDP, Italy, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Russia, France, Nepal, Mauritius, Sri Lanka, Israel, Egypt, UAE, Bhutan, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Philippines, Poland, Spain, Chile, they have been among the major destinations to which India supply the defense exports. And as per the Exim Bank report last year, it said that Mauritius, Mozambique, and Seychelles, they were among the top customers for Indian defense exports between 2017 and 21. So the highest one, definitely that we should be aware of. So the highest one goes to the Mauritius. Lastly, we'll take up Mint. So here, how global stock indices they impact the economy. So weightage matters, and basically here it is given for the MSCI India and MSCI emerging markets and the annual change in the indices. So MSCI indices, they are watched closely by the global investors to allocate funds based on the weightages assigned to different stocks. And MSCI it reduced the weightage of the four Adani group of companies after their market capitalization declined, and it later postponed the decision. So here we are examining the influence of such indices and the takeaways for the regulators. So what is actually the MSCI index? So it is basically, it stands for the Morgan Stanley Capital International. It is known for its stock indices, and it tracks the performance of stocks and acts as a base for exchange traded funds. So how are stocks pegged for its equity indices? So the basically the MSCI indices, they are market capitalization weighted indices, and the stocks selected for its equity indices are the ones which are easily traded and they have high liquidity. So these are the two factors on the basis of which these stocks are selected for computation of this index. And the highest weightage on the index is given to the stock with the largest market capitalization. And these indices, they are calculated every day. So the MSCI Index India, it evaluates the performance of the large and the mid-cap segments of the Indian markets. So for Adani, it reduced the weightage. And any takeaways for the market regulators? So it is important for the regulators to understand that the institutional investors, they are not influenced by the wisdom of only equity research, but the external factors to influence them. So the Hindenburg report is a case in point here, and regulators, they need to be cautious as the attitude of the institutional investors could ultimately impact other fundamentals like the rate of exchange, the current account deficit, and the cost push inflation affecting the country's growth story. And so this, like, we have already taken up in the Financial Express. So let's end it here. And thank you so much for joining in, Sarkari. I hope you have understood all the key things. And do not forget to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this video as much as possible. Thank you so much for joining us today.